Hello, my name is Vince Ochoa. Welcome to my Capstone project. Just want to say this was a really cool class. I learned a lot and it was really helpful. So let's see if I could put all of that information to use. Pew pew. Alright, so our situation is that we're flying from Kilo Lima Yankee Hotel, which is Lynchburg Regional Airport, to Kilo Lima India Tango, which is Little Rock National Airport. Um, as an alternate, we're using Kilo Bravo Tango Romeo, which is Baton Rouge Metropolitan. And the question is, can we use Baton Rouge as an alternate? Let's take a look. So on this flight, we got some equipment situations here. So we're on a CRJ 200 slash alpha model, which means we have a DME and a mode C transponder. However, our flight director and autopilot are inoperational. It's going to be a long flight. Um, as well as the ILS for runway 22 right glide slope is out of service at Baton Rouge. So this is going to cause some problems that we're going to have to dive into. Looking at Federal Aviation Regulation 91.169, which is the standard alternate weather minimums. For precision approaches, which are ILSs, you need at least 600-foot ceilings and 2-mile visibility. Whereas for a non-precision approach, which is essentially everything else we're going to use, is going to be 800-foot ceilings and 2 statute miles visibility. However, based on our flight operation manual, Liberty Airlines allows us to go lower than standard weather minimums, and it applies to our destination or departure alternates. So let's take a look at what those are for us. Also, in our airline manual, it states that we are not authorized to use the Jeppesen alternate minimums, which would be just labeled on the approach plates themselves. So the regulation 121.625 specifies that we must use minimums in our op specs instead. Um, in our op specs, chapter 4, 1.7, we can get our minimums from a 1 nav or 2 nav table as shown here. And we'll kind of talk about how to figure out what each one does as we go on. With all this information, we are left with some questions that we need to answer. So first we need to figure out what the forecast is going to be at our alternate for our ETA there. We need to figure out what the 1 nav minimums are. We need to figure out what the 2 nav minimums are. And that will help us determine if it's legal to use Baton Rouge as an alternate. And then, if all equipment was operational, what could we use to lower those minimums? So let's take a look. The TAF for Baton Rouge at the time of our ETA, which will be 1800, shows that there's a temporary TAF issued for the 12th, 1800 through 2100. It's going to be 1 statute mile, thunderstorms and rain, broken layer at 500 feet, scattered 2000 with cumulonimbus. So it sounds like it's going to be a pretty fun time getting in there, nevertheless. But based on our ETA, what we're concerned about is the 500-foot ceiling and the 1-mile visibility. Let's see if our minimums will let us get in there. We have a few options for approaches, even though the ILS for 22 right is out of service. We can use the ILS for runway 13, which will get us to 200 feet and half a mile visibility. We can use the localizer for runway 22 right, which will get us to 410 feet and 3/4 of a mile visibility. We can also use the VOR for runway 4 left, which will get us 551 feet and 1 3/4 of a mile visibility, or the VOR for runway 22 right, which will get us 410 feet and 1 1/4 mile visibility. This leaves us with the question of, can we use the 1 nav minimums? Well, in order to determine that, we're going to add 400 feet to the decision altitude and 1 mile to the visibility. So if you take a look here at all the approaches I previously mentioned, I listed the minimums and then added the 1 nav minimums to those. And basically, we get to choose the lowest option of those, which would be the ILS runway 13. It would get us down to 600 feet with 1.5 mile visibility. But based on those numbers, that is not low enough to get through the 500-foot ceilings with 1 mile visibility. So we're going to have to take a look at the 2 nav minimums now. Based on the 2 nav minimums, we're allowed to add 200 feet to the decision altitude and then half a mile visibility to the minimum visibility. So that same formula laid out there, ILS for runway 13 gets us 400 feet and 1 mile, and the localizer for runway 22 gets us 610 feet and 1 1/4 mile. So though we get a pick 2, we end up having to choose the highest of the two, which would be the localizer 22 right at 610 feet, 1 1/4 mile visibility, which is still higher than 500 feet and 1 mile. Therefore, we cannot use the 2 nav minimums either. This leads us to our question of, is it even legal to have Baton Rouge as an alternate? So the answer is no, because neither the 1 or the 2 nav will get us below the weather minimums at the time of our ETA. Now, what if all the equipment was operational? Well, then we can use the ILS for runway 22 right. And the minimum for that, if we were to use the 2 nav rules, would get us down to 407/8 of a statute mile. And then we would also use the ILS for runway 13, which would give us 401 mile. And that would be our 2 navigation choices. And then due to having to choose the highest of those two, it would get us that 401 on ILS 13, and 401 is lower than 501, so that would make our alternate legal at that point. In summary, because the ILS for runway 22 is out of service, um, based on the weather forecast for our ETA, we cannot use Baton Rouge as an alternate option for planning. If we were in flight and we actually needed to use it as an alternate, we could. But again, based on that forecast, there's going to be thunderstorms and whatnot, so it doesn't look like a good place to head to anyway. If the ILS was operational, we could use it as our planning alternate and all would be swell. But at this point, we would have to contact our dispatcher and just let them know that Baton Rouge is not legal because that ILS is inoperational. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.